Stephen Carroll is here with me in the studio. Hello, Stephen. We're going to start with that sticky subject of shops being allowed to open in France.
Yeah, that's right. Under French law, of course, trading on Sundays is very strictly regulated. Shops are only allowed to open under very strict conditions and in certain areas. Now, last December, the government added hardware stores to those list of shops that are allowed to open on Sundays. It was supposed to be a temporary measure until a new law was drafted for the sector, but the France's Council of State, its highest administrative court, struck down that ruling yesterday, forcing those shops to close this weekend. Now, unions have welcomed the move. The government says it's working on a new order which will allow those shops to reopen as soon as possible. Let's listen to the French Prime Minister, who was speaking on radio this morning about this.
There was a fixed period of time for this decree, and that's what must be changed, so there's no fixed period of time. Meanwhile, we've appointed Monsieur Bailly to the task of working on a new proposition that respects both days of rest, but also modern life. And the employees' rights must be respected as well.
Let's check in on what's happening on the markets now. Lots of companies' news out this morning for the markets to digest. As you can see, a negative start across the board. Just picking out a few shares for you. In London, Lloyds Bank has reported a return to pre-tax profit of more than €500 million. It's the first time the bank has turned a profit since it was bailed out by British taxpayers 6 years ago. Shares down over 1% this morning, though, the lender revealing that it's paid out more money over the payment protection insurance mis-selling scandal. They've now paid out €12.5 billion on that issue over recent years, but it is the bank nonetheless paying bonuses of €480 million this year. Also have a quick look at Publicis in France, which is also, their shares are up over 1% after reporting a record net profit. Over in Asia, the Nikkei closed down 1.8% after recent gains. Similar picture across all the Asian markets, as you can see. Over in Sydney, the S&P ASX 200 down in the red after unemployment there hit a 10-year high of 6% in January.
Now, a lot of companies are revealing their results today, including some big names here in France.
Yeah, France's biggest bank, BNP Paribas, has reported net profits of €4.8 billion for last year, far below expectations. That's partly because the lender is putting aside $1.1 billion to cover penalties over payments made in contravention of US sanctions against Iran. The bank has been reviewing transactions for years in an effort to reach a settlement with regulators. Shares down 3% in Paris this morning. The carmaker Renault has missed its target of selling 3 million cars in 2013. Sales were dragged lower both by the sluggish car market globally and particularly by sanctions against Iran, which lost it some 64,000 unit sales. Renault's revenues were almost 41 billion last year. It says it wants to grow that to 50 billion by 2017. That's given investors confidence. Those shares up almost 5% in Paris. And staying with the car market, Peugeot Citroën is said to have reached a deal with China's Dongfeng and the French government for a capital injection of €4 billion. Sources told the news agency Reuters that the board of the struggling car maker is set to examine the plan next week. The French government had promised to match investment from the Chinese car maker to ensure that Peugeot stayed a French company.
All right, let's move on to Bosnia now, where a wave of protests has been happening there in recent days.
Yeah, these demonstrations mainly focusing on the failure of a privatisation effort in the country. It's the legacy of dismantling communism there over 20 years ago, which saw many state companies sold into private hands. But 80% of those privatisations have failed, leaving people out of work and without an income. It's adding to the problem of unemployment in the country, which touches 40% in some areas. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more.
Once a bustling workplace, this factory's now silent and empty. It's just one of the former state-owned companies that's languished under private ownership. This detergent factory used to be the market leader. Just a few years later, its employees stopped receiving their salaries and production ground to a halt.
Imagine you have something secure and concrete, and then suddenly you don't have it anymore. They ripped off Dieter and its workers overnight. They stole from us, but we're now guarding the factory. Thank God for that.
A long-term industrial slowdown that's feeding frustration here in Bosnia. Tensions have now reached boiling point with unemployment at over 40%, a widening gap between rich and poor, and widespread corruption fueling much of the dissent. Demonstrations are going strong across the country as Bosnian protesters call for the government to step down.
Peaceful demonstrations are being held around Bosnia, and politicians have a lot to lose now that the people have finally decided to speak up.
Protesters are demanding snap elections, yet the establishment of a new political order is unlikely to address their political and economic concerns. Since the end of the war in 1995, power must be shared between three major groups: Serbs, Croats and Muslims, which can make reaching a consensus on key issues almost impossible.
And British handmade cosmetics company Lush has decided that the smell of success should be very sweet. Why is that?
Well, the company won, which is well known on the British high street, but is, relatively speaking, quite a small company, won what has been described as a David and Goliath legal battle against Amazon, which was selling other products of rivals using the label Lush on its website. So to celebrate, the husband and wife team behind the company have registered a trademark for a new line of products. It's called Christopher North, after the boss of Amazon UK. According to the Guardian newspaper, the range is going to be expanded to include deodorant and hair removal cream. Lush is already selling a new shower gel named after Amazon, with the description that it's rich, thick and full of it.
Oh, wow. All right. OK, thank you so much, Stephen. That was Stephen Carroll with all of today's business news. And it's now time to take a look at what's